There is a food that, within 30 minutes of eating it, physically changes the chemistry of your gut. It slows down how fast your stomach empties. It forms a gel-like barrier between the food you just ate and the cells lining your intestine. And it begins feeding microorganisms that send signals, directly, to your brain. It is not a supplement. It is not a drug. It is not expensive or hard to find. It is chia seeds. 2 tablespoons. And the research on what happens inside your body when you eat them consistently is far more interesting than anything printed on the bag. Today we are going to go system by system, your gut, your heart, your bones, your brain, your metabolism, and look at what the science actually says about what this tiny seed is doing. Not the marketing version. The mechanism. Stay with me through section 3, because the bone density finding alone is going to change how you think about this food entirely. Welcome to Longevity Lab, where we dig into the science of living longer and living well, and translate it into things you can actually use. If you are new here, subscribe now. We publish every week, and everything we cover is grounded in peer-reviewed research, no fads, no hype. Let's get into it. Here is where we start, because this is the foundation for almost everything else chia does in your body. When chia seeds come into contact with liquid, water, stomach acid, it does not matter, they absorb up to 10 times their own weight and form a thick gel. You have probably seen this if you have ever made chia pudding. That transformation you are watching in the bowl? That is also happening inside your stomach. Now here is why that matters. That gel physically slows down the rate at which your stomach empties its contents into the small intestine. Think of it as a natural speed bump between your meal and your bloodstream. The slower the transit, the slower the release of glucose into circulation, which means no sharp blood sugar spike, no reactive insulin surge, no energy crash 90 minutes later. 1 ounce of chia seeds, roughly 2 tablespoons, contains nearly 11 grams of dietary fiber. That is around 40% of the recommended daily intake in a single serving. And the majority of that fiber is soluble fiber, the kind that forms the gel. But the gel mechanism does something else that is less talked about. It creates a physical coating along the intestinal lining. Research suggests this may reduce intestinal irritation and support what scientists call gut barrier integrity, the ability of your intestinal wall to keep what should stay inside the gut, and prevent inflammatory particles from crossing into the bloodstream. A compromised gut barrier, sometimes called leaky gut, though researchers prefer the term intestinal permeability, is increasingly linked to systemic inflammation, autoimmune conditions, and metabolic disease. Anything that supports that barrier is working in your favor. And then the fiber feeds your gut bacteria. Soluble fiber acts as a prebiotic, fuel for the beneficial microorganisms in your colon. Those bacteria ferment the fiber and produce short-chain fatty acids, which actively suppress inflammatory signals throughout the body. Your gut bacteria are doing anti-inflammatory work, and chia fiber is the raw material they need to do it. One food. One mechanism. Multiple downstream effects. Chia seeds are the richest known plant source of omega-3 fatty acids on the planet. Not one of the richest, the richest. Ahead of flaxseed. Ahead of walnuts. And by a significant margin. About 60% of the fat content in chia seeds comes from a specific omega-3 called alpha-linolenic acid, or ALA. 2 tablespoons of chia gives you roughly 5 grams of ALA, which exceeds the adequate intake recommendation for omega-3s in most adult populations. Now here is the honest version of this story, because I think your time is too valuable for half the picture. ALA is not the same as the omega-3s you get from fatty fish, which are called EPA and DHA. Those are the forms your brain and cardiovascular system use most directly. ALA has to be converted by your body into EPA and DHA first, and that conversion process is, frankly, not very efficient. Depending on the individual, only around 5 to 15% of ALA makes it all the way to DHA. So does that make the omega-3s in chia seeds useless? No. But it does mean you need to understand what you are actually getting. Here is what the research does support. A 2019 review of studies found that higher ALA intake was associated with a 10% lower risk of cardiovascular disease and a 20% lower risk of fatal coronary heart disease. The Cardiovascular Health Study, which followed more than 5,000 men and women aged 65 and older, found a 50% lower risk of fatal ischemic heart disease in those with the highest ALA intake. ALA also has anti-inflammatory properties of its own, independent of conversion. Research shows it helps modulate inflammatory gene expression and reduces oxidative stress in vascular tissue. And emerging animal research from 2026 showed that Chia oil specifically reduced the activity of NFB, a master regulator of inflammation in the body, in brain tissue. The practical implication: Chia seeds are a genuinely valuable omega-3 source, especially if you are plant-based or not eating oily fish 2 to 3 times a week. But they are not a replacement for marine omega-3s. They are a complement to a diet that already contains some. If you are relying on Chia seeds alone for your omega-3 intake, pair them with fatty fish or consider an algae-based DHA supplement, since algae is where fish get their DHA in the first place. Quick pause. If you are finding this useful, hit that like button now. It genuinely helps this channel reach people who need this information, and it costs you nothing. Now, Section 3. I promised this one would change how you think about Chia seeds entirely. Here it is. When most people think about calcium, the mineral your bones and teeth are built from, they think about milk. Maybe supplements. Dairy in general. Almost nobody thinks about Chia seeds. They should. Gram for gram, Chia seeds contain more calcium than most dairy products. 1 ounce provides around 18% of your daily calcium requirement. But it is not just calcium. Chia seeds also deliver meaningful amounts of phosphorus, magnesium, and manganese, all of which are directly involved in bone mineralization. These are not secondary nutrients. They are cofactors in the same biological process that determines how dense and resilient your bones actually are. Why does this matter? Because bone density loss is silent, it is progressive, and it starts earlier than most people expect. Peak bone mass is typically reached in your late 20s to early 30s. After that, the question is not whether you are losing density, the question is how fast. Osteoporosis affects an estimated 200 million people globally. But osteopenia, the stage before osteoporosis, where bone density has begun to decline but has not yet crossed the clinical threshold, is far more common and far less discussed. Many people in their 40s and 50s are already in this territory without knowing it. The calcium story alone would be enough to make Chia seeds worth including in your diet. But magnesium adds another layer. Magnesium is required for the conversion of vitamin D into its active form in the body, and vitamin D is the primary hormone that regulates calcium absorption from the gut. If you are deficient in magnesium, your body cannot properly activate vitamin D, which means the calcium you are eating, from any source, is not being absorbed as efficiently as it should be. 2 tablespoons of Chia seeds provides around 23 to 25% of the recommended daily intake of magnesium. That is a meaningful contribution. One practical note: Chia seeds contain compounds called phytates that can partially inhibit mineral absorption. Soaking your Chia seeds before eating them, which is what you are doing when you make Chia pudding, reduces phytate content and improves bioavailability. So the pudding format is not just convenient. It is mechanistically better for mineral uptake. This is the section I find most fascinating right now, because the research is genuinely new, and it reframes what Chia seeds are actually doing in a way that most nutrition coverage has not caught up with yet. A 2026 study published in the journal Nutrition looked at what happens in the brain when Chia is consumed alongside a poor diet. Researchers fed rats a high-fat, high-fructose diet, the kind designed to mimic the metabolic effects of a typical Western eating pattern, and added Chia flour or Chia oil to the diets of 2 of the groups. What they found was not primarily about weight or blood sugar. It was about gene expression in the brain itself. The Chia supplemented groups showed increased expression of genes called POMC and CART, which are involved in the brain's satiety signaling pathways. In plain terms, the brain got better at recognizing fullness. It became more responsive to the signals telling it that enough food had been consumed. They also found that Chia increased the activity of NF2, a key regulator of the body's antioxidant defenses in the brain. And it reduced NFB, the inflammatory pathway we mentioned earlier, specifically in brain tissue. And leptin signaling improved. This is significant because leptin resistance, Where the brain stops responding properly to leptin, the hormone that signals satiety, is one of the mechanisms that drives persistent hunger even in people who have eaten enough. The brain simply stops receiving the message. The researchers concluded that these changes were likely linked to Chia's impact on the gut microbiome, which brings us back to the fiber mechanism from section 1. The gut-brain axis, the two-way communication network between your intestinal microbiome and your central nervous system, appears to be a significant part of how Chia is producing these neurological effects. Important caveat: this is animal research. The mechanisms are compelling and the findings are consistent with what we understand about the gut-brain axis in humans, but direct human trials are needed before we can draw firm conclusions. I am telling you about it because the mechanistic picture is worth understanding, not because the headline is settled science. What we can say with confidence in humans is this: the fiber and protein content of chia seeds. Chia is a complete protein, meaning it contains all 9 essential amino acids, do produce measurable effects on satiety. Studies consistently show that people who consume chia seeds with meals report greater fullness and lower spontaneous calorie intake across the following hours. The cardiovascular research on chia seeds is where the evidence base is most established, and also where it is most nuanced. I want to give you the real picture. Let's start with what the research clearly supports. The combination of soluble fiber, ALA omega-3 fatty acids, and antioxidants in chia seeds creates multiple simultaneous effects on cardiovascular risk markers. Soluble fiber reduces LDL cholesterol, often called the bad cholesterol, through a mechanism that is elegant in its simplicity. Cholesterol is used to produce bile acids in the liver. Bile acids are released into the small intestine to aid fat digestion. Normally they are reabsorbed and recycled. But soluble fiber, including the gel chia forms, binds to bile acids in the gut and carries them out of the body. The liver then has to pull more cholesterol from the bloodstream to make new bile acids. Net result: lower circulating LDL. ALA has been shown in multiple studies to reduce blood pressure and triglycerides and to support healthy arterial function. A 2019 review found consistent associations between higher ALA intake and reduced cardiovascular mortality. And the cardiovascular health study cohort data I referenced earlier, that 50% reduction in fatal ischemic heart disease, represents one of the largest and most rigorous datasets we have on ALA and cardiovascular outcomes in older adults. Now the nuance. A 2024 meta-analysis pooling 10 randomized controlled trials specifically on chia supplementation in overweight subjects found that chia alone did not produce statistically significant changes in lipid profiles across the board. The effect sizes were modest and variable across studies. This does not mean chia is ineffective. It means that chia is not a pharmaceutical intervention with a single, isolated effect. It is a whole food with a complex nutritional profile, and its cardiovascular benefits appear most significant when it is part of a broader dietary pattern, not when it is added on top of an otherwise poor diet and measured in isolation. The practical framing: chia seeds are not a substitute for cardiovascular lifestyle habits. They are a high-leverage food that, when eaten consistently as part of a diet rich in other plant foods, contributes meaningful support to heart health through multiple pathways simultaneously. That is actually how food works. And it is a stronger case, honestly, than any single nutrient supplement can make. Let me bring this home. Chia seeds are not magic. No food is. But when you look at what is actually happening inside your body, the gel forming in your gut, the fiber feeding your microbiome, the minerals building your bones, the omega-3s modulating inflammation, the signals changing how your brain processes hunger, you are looking at a food that is doing serious biological work. Quietly. Every time you eat it. 2 tablespoons a day. Soaked in water, added to a smoothie, stirred into oats, made into pudding overnight. It does not require a lifestyle overhaul. It does not require anything except consistency. That is the theme that keeps coming up in longevity research, across every domain we cover on this channel. The interventions that compound over decades are rarely the dramatic ones. They are the quiet, daily ones that most people underestimate, until they see what 20 years of consistency actually produces. If this video gave you something useful, subscribe to Longevity Lab. We publish every week, and everything we cover is grounded in peer-reviewed research, translated into things you can actually apply. And drop a comment below telling me which section surprised you most. The most requested topic from those comments shapes what we cover next, so your comment directly influences what gets made here. I will see you in the next one. Check out this video next. It goes deeper on one of the most overlooked longevity levers we have covered on this channel.